Good afternoon. Thank you for attending. We'll continue our bond information and options discussion here. This is the fourth part in our series. We're going to discuss, and hopefully we get enough information and we have everything we need to make a decision and take action on the board meeting this evening. I'd remind everybody that we are being recorded here. It'll be broadcast on PSC 191 and also on the school district YouTube page for those who aren't able to attend and would like to see what we discuss at the study session this afternoon. So with that, Mr. Nunemaker will take us through through the information and options that we've discussed in the past with a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Board President Mr. Lerman, Deputy Superintendent Whitney, and board members. This afternoon, the study session is going to cover a few areas. The board's support to assure state matching funds are available to the district. There's going to be 3 bond scenarios presented. We're going to look at classroom capacity, and then also the K-3 grant information. We'll cover that also. So first is the School Construction Assistance Program. It's otherwise known as ISCAP. It has a D-form process, and each one of those steps assure that the district is meeting the state's requirements. Many of those steps involve the board and board resolutions, and some of those we'll see later on tonight in our board meeting. The first step is D-form 1. This is the first form to be submitted. It's an assessment of the district's facilities and that must be conducted. When it's finalized, the assessment is called a study and a survey. This assessment is made available to the board for consideration, and the board adopts the study and survey. Also, our district must contact districts near us so that we can survey them to see if they have open space for our students. Once that's completed, and we receive the information back from the districts that in most cases they don't have space, then the board also acts on that. The next board action is in the D5 form. The board authorizes signature authority for the state project that's being conducted that will receive state match funds, assures the project will not aggravate racial imbalance, and must approve the educational specifications for that project. After the D7 step, the board accepts the value engineering recommendations. These are recommendations that a third-party architect or engineer firm makes to assure that all cost savings and design integrity on the project are considered. Also, the architect will make constructability recommendations that the plans and specifications are good to start construction. Once bids are solicited and a contractor is selected for the project, the D9 form must be completed, and the board recommending the bid award, and then a resolution for the construction of intent to construct the project. At the D11 stage, commissioning takes place, which means all of the systems, plumbing, heating, cooling, and airflow have all been tested and are functioning as designed. Once the construction is completed and the commissioning report has been submitted, the board accepts the commissioning report and then accepting the project as final and complete. So the board is very active as we go out for construction processes, and we're in the middle of going through that process right now at Pasco High School. And again, we'll see some of those resolutions coming forward at the board meeting tonight. So looking back at some of the other bond projects that have been conducted, there was questions around what was considered in 2011 bond and the 2013 bond. The 2011 bond was to construct an elementary school at Road 60 in Sandifer and a middle school at Road 52 on Power Line. Also a West Side Early Learning Center, acquire land for new expanded facilities, make capital improvements for Stevens Middle School, make capital improvements for Livingston Elementary School, relocate New Horizons, and provide additional classrooms throughout the district. And then also to make health, safety, and infrastructure improvements and to the educational ancillary school facilities. The 2011 bond did not pass. Along with that, the West Side Early Learning Center was intended to be a kinder center. I passed out some information for the board. That came from the 2010 Pasco Facilities Task Force, and so you have that.
And then I just wanted to say, I'd asked Randy about this because we've been hearing that the Early Learning Center was to be a pre-K center back then, and we just wanted to double check that was it intended to be a pre-K center or a kinder center? And just to reiterate, that was intended to be a kinder center. It had the name Early Learning, just like Captain Gray did, but it was never intended to be a pre-K center at the time.
That's correct. The 2013 bond project that recently passed was to construct a new elementary school at Road 52 and Power Line Road, a new elementary school on Road 60 in Sandifer, construct a new elementary school at California Street and Spokane Street. That would be our Franklin, McClintock, and Curie elementary schools. Make capital improvements to Stevens Middle School, Pasco High School, relocate New Horizons High School, provide additional classrooms at Pasco School District schools, make health, safety, and infrastructure improvements, make traffic flow improvements at Mark Twain Elementary, and then design future construction of new schools. And of course, this bond did pass. So moving on, at the last study session, there was discussion around the line item, I guess, in the bond options. Many of the bond options had support for a K-3 grant that the district might get in the future for class size reduction. Depending on the option, the cost of that grant to the district would have been $7.8 to $10 million. The cost is about 6 to 8 cents. The plus to this program, we want to make sure it is understood, is that it's relatively inexpensive cost. We'll see that later on to the taxpayers at $12,500 per student. We've taken it off all the options, but it can be added back on again if the board chose to do so. Another option about financing this, one of the concerns is would we have financing available to us in the future to be able to do that? And one of the options that was discussed at the time might be a non-voted debt. After checking on that, Mr. Roberts found out that non-voted debt is not an option for new construction. It can be used for acquisition, purchasing a building, remodel, repair of an existing school or a facility. And right now, what we have right now, the current capital funds we have available have already been designated for projects. So the funding for that, as far as the $10 million, the board can choose to redirect those funds. But at this point, the way that's been, we've been directed, then those funds wouldn't be available unless the board decided they wanted to do something different that way. So let's talk about bond options. This is bond option 2. This bond option has not changed from this first study session. This meets the Pasco Facility Task Force recommendation. This scenario would add 2 elementary schools, build Stevens Middle School, new and lieu. Tax rate would be 50 cents. There would be 41% of the project would receive state support. Would add about 1,600 student capacity at K-6 and up to 200 student capacity at the middle school level. Bond option 5 would add an elementary school, adding 800 student capacity. It would add a middle school number 4 at a capacity of 1,100. Rebuild Isaac Stevens Middle School, new and lieu, with up to 200 additional students. The estimated tax rate would be at 62 cents. In this scenario, if you take a look, the completion date or occupancy date would be for the 2 middle schools would be around 2020. That would allow the 6th grade to move up into the middle schools in 2020, roughly estimating about 1,200 students. Bond option 11 would provide a new elementary school at an additional 800 student capacity. Stevens Middle School, new in lieu, at up to 200 student capacity. 4 new classrooms at Curie Elementary School, adding 90 additional student capacity. 24 classrooms at Chiawana High School, which would add an additional 500 student capacity. And of course, in each one of those, these options, other projects are also considered in that. And those are on each one. So with that, I'm going to move into classroom capacity conversation a little bit with where we're at with the buildings and maybe how these bond options might affect that depending on which option was chosen. So overall, we took a look at the district, and you have the full spreadsheet handed out to you. It wasn't quite, a little bit too long to fit onto a PowerPoint, but I want to touch on a couple of key areas. If you look in the middle of the screen, in the center of the screen, under the estimated capacity, what we had to do is we looked at how the classrooms were being used and how many students were in each one of those classrooms, depending on whether the classroom was a specialist classroom, say for music or band. We took those, we either deducted those classrooms out because they weren't housing permanent students inside of them. And so what we came up with is an estimated capacity as of 2015. The total elementary average was 23. The middle school average was 19. The high school average was 25. Once we applied the OSPI's enrollment forecast, you'll see that the 2021 class average then increased to 24 for elementary school, 22 for middle school, and 28 for the high school. Another point to keep in mind when we look at the classroom capacities, it really doesn't tell the whole story for some of the schools. If you look at the orange on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there's teachers right now using non-classroom spaces as classrooms. And we felt like that to get a real picture of what's happening in the schools, we needed to be able to touch on that. So you can see that that's happening in the elementary school at this point and somewhat in the high school. And then the also teachers that are on a cart right now would be another way to gauge, what classroom space is actually available in a school. And you'll see that the total elementary teachers is 9 on a cart. And then between the 2 high schools, there's actually 29 teachers on a cart right now. So they're pretty full. So looking then what would happen if how we apply the bond options to these numbers, what would that look like? So looking at classroom capacity, option 2, what you can see is we had to take into consideration that as we add the buildings, there's going to be needed use for special needs rooms. There's going to be music rooms, again, that have to be considered that wouldn't be a standard classroom. So we accounted for that. And what you can see with option 2, if you look at the total at the bottom of the elementary, you'll see an estimated of class size average of 22. And really, because there's not a huge increase in the OSPI's enrollment forecast to 2021, at that point it didn't change. It still stayed at 22. You can see because of the additional classrooms, you'll see that actually dropped the classroom size from 23 to 22, or in 2001, 24 to 22. The same thing you can see in the 7 and 8 grades at the middle school. Average 19 students per classroom, and 22, you can see that changed to 18 and 21 with the addition of the 200 students that would be at the middle school. And in this case, in Pasco High School or Chiawana High School, it didn't change because there was nothing in the bond option to address the high school. Classroom capacity, option 5. So we'll start out with the elementary schools again. The difference with option 5 was a little fun to try to put these numbers together, because in option 5, we're taking the 6th graders at a point and we're moving them back into the middle school, which is going to reduce the enrollment in the elementary and of course increase the enrollment in the middle school. So that's why you see a little bit different layout of the numbers here. So before we would do that, the classroom count for the elementary school K-5 would have been 23. And then after doing that move, the classroom average would be at 20. The 6-8 middle school would have been at 19. And with the additional classrooms and but also with the number of students we had, I think it was 1,367 students was the actual count that would move from 6th grade into middle school. You can see that increased up to 25 students per classroom. And at the 9-12 high school level, you can see the estimated capacity with the addition of Chiawana and the enrollment from 23 then to 24 classrooms. So with the additional classrooms, we were basically able to hold steady. Keep in mind, this doesn't necessarily... What's that?
Additional classrooms as a high school.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I looked at the 24. I was thinking of the 24 Chiawana classrooms. So I think it's important that in this case, we try to account for the classroom teachers that are that don't have classrooms or working out of a classroom, and also the tennis shoe teachers when we do these calculations, so that when we make these changes, we want them to then be in a classroom, and so we account for that. Then classroom capacity, option 11. Again, focusing on the class size average. K-6 elementary school right now is 23, and in 2021 would be at 24. With the additional classrooms, and again accounting for those teacher changes, we'd be at 23 and 23 with option 11. So still not in bad shape. The middle school level would be estimated at 19 in 2015, and class size average 22 in 2021. And then the total for class size average 18 and 21 once the with the additional middle school option. Excuse me, Stevens option. Then the high school option would be 24 and 27, and the total for the 2015 with the 24 classrooms for Chiawana would be 24, and we'd still move up to 27 in 2021. So still a higher classroom count there.
So what would happen if you didn't do the bond for the high school? What would happen to the classroom counts?
Oh, they'd start to soar.
So if you go back to
Oops.
yeah, how come those numbers? So option 5, it says 23 right now. If you go to option 11, it says 24 right now, right?
Well, what
Am I
you'll,
missing something?
yeah, what you'll see is as I,
23 and
what this one's the one we're trying to take into consideration, the movement of the 6th grade into the,
Right, but that doesn't affect high school. My point is, they're
Oh.
on high school, you got 23 right now. And if you go to the next slide, which is option 11, it's 24. So it should be the same.
It should be different.
might have been a rounding when we did the formula possibly.
The high school classrooms.
But option
It should
5
be
does not
less.
have the high school
Right.
class.
No.
Right.
And so those estimated class averages should be bigger on 5 than 11, where we're adding the high school classrooms.
Probably are switched.
No, what you'll, yeah, I'll have to check those. I'll check those numbers.
Okay.
Those numbers on.
Yeah.
We could probably just switch them and imagine that that's.
I know when we took a look at it, what we saw was that, to give you an example, is if, and this is on your larger form, what you'll see is there's 23 I believe, between the, and this is speaking of Chiawana, there's 23, I believe, teachers that are affected. There's roughly 18 of them that are teachers on CART, and there's a few of them that are working out of other spaces than classrooms. So when we put that back together, basically the 24 rooms would accommodate the teachers that currently don't have a classroom and maybe leave one extra. But we'll double check those numbers and I'll get back to you. So I'm going to scroll back up to the bond options themselves and open it up for discussion and questions.
What's the recommended middle school size, classroom size for our middle schools?
For the
quality?
QEC?
Yes.
I want to say it was 23.
23. And each of these options?
Wait, let me go back. I think I have that on my, the first form here. Hang on, there we go. Quality Ed 24. QEC class size would be 24 for middle school.
And can we look at the numbers for each of the options in middle school? 24.
Start out to 2.
Are
Are these ones you wanted to see?
Well, it's on the student numbers, right?
There you go.
Right there. So option 2 has 19. So option 2 takes us down to 18 and 21 in 2015 and 2021.
Right.
And what does option 5 do? Option 5.
I'm not sure these numbers are.
I think the only difference is, so option 5, your option 11 should be those numbers for high school, because those, it looks like, got switched. Because option 5 and option 2, as far as doing something to the high school, should be the same, because nothing's done to the high school, whereas option 11 is, and so that's the one that should be changed, not option 5. So that, yeah, so then go to your option 11. So I think that just needs to, your numbers for the high school need to be those numbers on option 11, and the ones from option 11, which is the same as option 2, would be on this one.
I can double check those.
So if we move the 6th grade back and build a 4th middle school, it puts us at 25 students in 2021 per classroom. Slightly over, I guess. Okay. And what, can I see the last, option 11 also?
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Any of the other bond options you want to look at? So again,
Yeah,
open
well,
up the
if no one else,
discussion.
I'm sure I'll add discussion. I feel like I talk a lot, but if no one else has any comments, I have some comments. I certainly, and I've made, points at our previous sessions, and, certainly I'm disappointed and frustrated that I seem to be in the minority, but the more I meet with people and talk with teachers and parents and community members, the more I feel that doing something with Stevens and another middle school is our best choice going forward. If you go to bond option 5, I would even like to see this have the Chiawana classrooms added, because as you've shown right now, there are 23 teachers on a cart, running teachers, whatever you want to call them. And the board received an email from Ms. Stillwell that beautifully explained the challenges of this and how it adversely affects student performance at the school when they're not able to access their teacher as well, the teacher's not able to set up as well, the classroom is in disarray when they have to go to a new classroom throughout the day. This is an extreme challenge. So if we added the Chiawana classrooms to this, to me that would be the ideal scenario. We fix Stevens, we have another middle school, which is the most forward-thinking, seeing that our middle school numbers are going to increase roughly by 400 students. And so That helps take care of that. Takes care of our sixth graders where they seem to be the best served. Has the elementary school for West Pasco as the priority first right off the bat that we take care of. And it essentially affects all grade levels. So there's essentially something in this for everyone, all areas of our city, all grade levels, that we're helping take care of that. And it seems to be the most, like I said, forward thinking as far as let's get ahead of some things and not just keep piddling around, always behind on our facilities. I mean, we just need a lot more facilities in Pasco, and so, we can debate where to put them or what grades, or we can have elementary be a little bit more crowded or middle school be more crowded, but we have a location already for the 4th middle school already that we own that we could build on right away. And so I am definitely in favor of bond option 5, which with the addition of the Chihuahua classrooms added to it.
My problem with bond option 5 though is we do have a front-funded elementary school. Okay, so we have an elementary school. I think if we I've been out in the schools a little bit more and tried to get a kind of a feel for what's going on. And I hear a lot more complaints about Chihuahua than Pasco for overcrowded, and lots of teachers frustrated with, one teacher I talked to was just so happy that she finally was there long enough, which had been like a long time, I was surprised, to get in a permanent classroom, and how hard it was to go from classroom to classroom to classroom on other teachers' prep hours. And I think that's a much more critical concern right now than trying to reduce class sizes, is getting teachers in permanent classrooms for various reasons. My concern with this is still that I absolutely agree. I think if we do this, if we do anything, we've got to add more room to the high school. That's where a big part of our growth is. This has an elementary school. It does have another middle school, which will add to the elementary, and it does have a front-funded, but it's also 62 cents. I'm very concerned that we haven't passed a bond this big in years and years and years. I don't know if ever. So that's my biggest concern if we make this even bigger, and yet I think it's critical to get the high school in. It said the estimated tax rate is 62 cents on this. Before, the estimated tax rate was 65 cents.
And that was with.
And that was with that, and so you took off the elementary school. Why didn't it drop 6 cents?
Because it was only 2 or 3 cents.
It only dropped 3 cents
But that's
when
what
you
the-
took the elementary school off.
That
Was that elementary 17?
No, it was the.
Yes.
The one with the K-3 grant?
Super scale.
Yeah, that's because the district's portion of that elementary school, depending on how the scenario worked out here, would have been either 7.8 million or maybe $10 million, not the full school cost. Because we would have received about $21 million of that in a grant from the state.
It also has, so this one has the elementary funded at 43%. Now you have it at 100%, and then the middle school only funded at 64%.
Yeah, to be,
Another-
sorry.
That's just another concern of mine, is that we're not taking full advantage, because they feel like we already have enough room, we're not taking full advantage of the state match with these, anyway, options. CHS classrooms are 10 million, so that would approximately add 8 cents to the grant, making this a 70-cent bond with CHS. I'm just worried. I don't know if that will pass. It's just very high, and we already have a lot of taxes in this area where, anyway, we're the highest paid taxed city in the Tri-Cities, so I don't know. I'm worried about that. I feel like with bond option 11, we get smaller class sizes, we still get Stevens, and we increased the middle school a little bit. And then we make a new middle school priority for the next bond. But that way we get an elementary school, Curie bigger, Curie's huge right now, as is Robinson. And this is the only one that addresses adding some east side schools. CHS. I just think that's critical from what I've heard, and the growth that we see in these growth charts that you gave us is happening at the middle school and the high school level. We have room in our middle school to grow because we put 6 grades back. We've got to do something about the high school. And we've, even if we move the kids into the middle school, we have to have an elementary school.
Well, the only
So,
way you can move the middle school back is if you build a new one.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with option 11.
No, and you can't do that with optional.
If we added the CH classrooms, would we get 100% match? If we did it on, like she was suggesting on 5?
We probably wouldn't get, no.
There's enough high school eligibility for 100% match in DHS.
Even with all of the other things that happened, is it?
The high school state match is calculated separate from the K-8 match. So it has its own dollars available for it. So it wouldn't affect, the match that goes towards the high school wouldn't affect the middle school or the elementary school.
Can you, it's shown on the slide, I think. Can you go back to a
Okay.
number of, doesn't it say 9 to
So that would make
12?
70 cents.
No, this one doesn't say it, does it?
No, that doesn't have the high school, but I was just wondering if we would get
Yeah.
100% match on that.
I agree with Ms. Phillips. I think the bond option 11 is the next best option in my mind. It addresses, again, all levels, addressing the different levels. It does add a little bit of capacity at the middle school level by increasing Stephen's size, which is nice. It's a little bit cheaper. The cost obviously is a concern. Whatever the cost is, I personally don't think there will be a huge difference in level of support for a $65 million bond versus an $85 million bond. I could be wrong, but I think there will be enough people that see the value in getting that 4th middle school built that would support that might be frustrated with this since it doesn't add that, as there would be the number of people that are like, I don't know, 65 and we can support, but 85 not so much. I feel like most people would they'd either support either one or not at all. So I don't see that much of a difference there, but I agree, this would be my second choice, bond option 11.
This was written to us by a member of the community, and I'd never thought of this in any way, shape, or form. But she said that in district that she had lived in before, they had tried to pass this bond and it didn't pass. And a lot of people had said, well, we don't support this part of the bond. So they separated those two things out and ran 2 bonds at the same time. And incidentally, both passed. And so has anything like that? Could you run just a junior high bond, a new junior high bond, and then like bond number 11? And, because the difference there would probably be close to the, 24 cents or maybe it'd be 30 cents more. Has anything like that ever happened in this area?
Not since I've worked for the district in the last 17, 18 years. I went to a WASBO conference here recently, and for the business managers for education. And at that conference, they did quite a presentation on bonds and bonds that passed and bonds that didn't, and the timing. And that's such a unique scenario, running 2 bonds for 2 different schools. I would have thought that they might have put it up on the screen, but in the last, they went all the way back to the 70s, and nothing like that was mentioned, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I read that proposal as well, and I thought that was part of me thinks that it's quite innovative, part of me thinks it's a little bit gimmicky, but if we did decide to do something, I would be in favor of that. We could run it as bond option 11, as bond option A. Bond option A must pass for bond option B to pass. Bond option B would add the 4th middle school. You couldn't pass bond option B without bond option A passing, so that way it's divided up a little bit and people can see the difference. Like I said, I feel it's a kind of gimmicky and a little bit confusing to people, although if we explain it well, I think it would make sense. And that way you could say we could pass this, but maybe the people that don't want to support the other one, we could at least pass this. I don't know if that would have a better chance of passing or not, but if we decided to do that, that's how I would propose it be presented. This bond option as the bond option A, adding the 4th middle school as the B, and then that type of scenario where A must pass for B to pass. You couldn't pass just B. Anyways, but I don't know if I didn't look into that either.
More confusing, wouldn't it?
It's a little confusing, but again, I would support that.
I know on the west side, one of the schools ran a bond this last April, and they ran 2 bonds, but I think they were structured differently, or maybe one was a bond and one was a technology levy, but I think buildings were tied into both, and I know when the guy from, was it Piper Jaffray, our bond consultant, when he was here, he talked about was it a technology bond? He talked about a different bond option, and I don't know, I don't think you can run 2 straight bonds. I just can't imagine you could run 2 competing bonds on the same election, but if you structure them differently, you might be able to do that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Howard or Kim, I think there is a capital project bond you can run that's different than our normal bond, that is specifically a capital project bond, is that?
I know there's the technology side.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember which district it was, but there
Yeah.
was, one of them ran 2 bonds, and they passed them both, but, or 2 different, whatever they were. I don't know if one was a bond, was there a capital levy? Something was different about what he talked about. And I don't know if that's an option. As far as these options go, again, I don't know why the 2011 bond failed. I think it would be worth getting some information on that, and I would expect that everybody in this room voted for that, so we're probably not a good test group to ask why it failed. But it would be, was it the rate? Was it the middle school? Was it too many elementary schools? Was there something in that bond that people didn't like?
You know, look,
Oh. So I think at that point, then we said we're going to go to this elementary model because we can build these more efficiently, less expensive. We are not even a year into that, and now we're talking about maybe adding another middle school and going back. By the time we run this bond, we'll have a year and a half into that. I don't know if we are failing if there's something in our 6th grade in the elementary school that is saying we've got to change now, or if we can't run this program a little bit longer. I would be in favor of this option right here. I like this option. It gives us another elementary school, which we desperately need on the west side. It adds a little bit of space on the east side in our elementaries. It adds some space to the high school, and if Ms.
This
Stillwell's...
bond?
I think you're thinking of bond
Excuse
11.
me.
Oh,
You'd switch it, that's
okay.
fine.
11, yeah. If Ms. Stillwell's letter is a good barometer, then that is desperately needed as well. I think at this point, this puts us at a good point. If we run a bond or look at a bond 4 years from now, that then we've got 4 more years with 6th grade in the elementary school. We can make a better decision then at what point then, what we want to do going forward. Because at that point, we're either going to need another middle school if we want to move 6th grade back to middle school, or we're going to need to build more elementary schools. So I like this option. I understand this doesn't give us another middle school right now, but I'm not sure that that's the direction we should be going without some strong indication that our 6th grade in the elementary school is not working.
You know, one thing I thought about when Steve was talking was right now we have signed a 6-year agreement with the curriculum, and that largely affects elementary schools, in that it's the math and it's the 2 biggest things in elementary schools. It's the maths and the English language arts. And by running a bond, another bond 4 years down the road, if we need middle school by then, everything falls off by 2028. And so in 4 years, we would be in a better position to get a middle school, and it would be really nice timing that if we decided to adopt new curriculum or to adjust it, which would probably be maybe more the case in 6 years from now, we can adjust that, because right now the K-6 is different than 7-12, and so we could get the curriculum for 6-12 during that new curriculum. So that timing actually works really well for a middle school, down the road a little bit.
So what about under this option here, option 11, if we added back in that grant money, that would only raise that by 3 cents. And so if that was available, then that money would be available for that 21.
Yeah, I agree with you,
Million.
Ms. Lincoln. I think I know that there was some question about the confusion of that to the voters, but since it's now been shown that we do not have the money to accept that if we received it, I think that would be a mistake to suddenly not be able to accept that if we were to receive it. So I agree with that. I would prefer to have that included in this bond option 11 if that's what we chose, that we would have the 7.8 or 10 million included in that. It's not that confusing. We just tell people that, if we get this, we would use this money towards that, and if not, we won't. I think people can understand that. The other comment I wanted to make was, I have a little bit of trouble trying to always go back and think of what was going on in people's minds 5 or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Especially 15 years, like what happened in Pasco. This is a whole different city now. Even in the little area where I live, the area that the people I go to church with is just a really small area. No houses have been added essentially in the last 5 years since we moved. It's pretty much just a finite area. And dozens of families in those 5 years have moved out and dozens have moved in. So even if we're not going to look at the growth of Pasco with new voters, just people moving in and out has been a lot in West Pasco, at least in the area where I live. So I think we're just in such a different position now. I don't spend too much time worrying about what people thought or voted for or the direction they wanted to take 5 or 10 years ago, because we're just a much different city now. And so I spend a lot of time meeting with people now at the schools and teachers and parents and kind of figuring out what our situation is now, instead of constantly trying to figure out whoever voted 5 or 10 years ago, what they were thinking and what has or hasn't been done in Pasco in the past.
How much is how many cents per thousand is it to add the super SCAP money back? Is it 6 to 8 is what you're saying right there?
Yeah, 68 cents.
And this one, it was 6 cents from the difference that it shows on bond 11.
If we were to receive that grant without adding this to the bond, you said all the current capital funds are designated for other projects, but we could move it around. We could move it, and then could we still use non-voted debt to replenish? No, the other
Well, you can't.
other projects that we still believe need to happen.
Yes, just can't use it for new construction. I think that's correct, Howard?
Yeah.
You can't use non-voter debt for new construction. So we would have to come up with the money, which is possible, because we could furnish the school with the non-voter debt.
No.
It's all considered part
Yeah.
Oh, so we can't do non-voter
Right.
debt.
Right, we have to.
of breaking
yeah.
ground.
Oh, so we kind of need to add that
Yeah,
back then.
that's what I'm thinking, we need to add it back.
If we would have received it this year, would we have been able to be, what's the right word, creative, and still accepted the money and made the project happen? Or would we have had to turn it down?
I would have to turn that question over to our Howard Roberts.
Again, it would be reprioritizing the existing capital items that we've been in discussions on land purchases, that sort of thing. And then you would have to look at, the general fund, have to look at that, which is always tricky because that changes every year as far as what
It-
design. But yes, you could do.
So is your gut feeling that if we didn't add this super SCAP to, say, bond option 11 or bond option 5, and we were to get it next year, the board could make it happen with what we have? It'd be reprioritizing, I think is what I heard you say.
It's tough to say, I don't want to lose a lot of it, but I
Yeah.
don't know what the conditions are next year and how quickly we want to move on some of these other things that we're looking, some have still time in it, so.
Okay, thank you.
So how about, can you check with, is it Trevor?
That would be Jim McNeil.
What's that?
It was Jim McNeil.
Well, I think Trevor was talking about the technology, or not technology, but I think he called it a capital levy, if I remember right.
I got his presentation here, he's got a capital projects levy.
Yeah.
It's not a bond.
So my only interest in that is I worry about we add 8 more cents to this, it just puts us over the 50-cent mark. And maybe that's not a big deal, but this is something where, and maybe we're gonna have to tell voters, look, this additional 8 cents is a maybe.
It's
My
6.
understanding
That's
is,
what it changed from when they pulled it
well,
off.
6 to 8, so
Well,
let's just
because
go with
this
8.
one was 7.8.
Yeah. Overpromise, underdeliver, that's right. Wait,
So-
underpromise, overdeliver.
So if I'm not sure how you go out and tell people, look, this is really a 50 whatever cent levy, 54-cent levy, but it's probably going to be just 46 because 8 cents is really dependent on the legislature not delivering. And if we can break those out, I don't want to get too complicated, but if we can run 2 separate bonds, a capital, or not bond, one for what we need, and then one for the big guess. And I don't know what a capital projects levy, I know it's got a shorter term, so it's,
That's 6 years.
but if it's $10 million, 6 years, maybe that's palatable. It probably changes that rate, but we let people know that, hey, if we get this big grant of money, we're willing to spend this additional money.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Christensen. I think that's a good idea. If we can do that separate bond or whatever we want to call it, where it's just very clearly, that this is what this is for, and I think that would be ideal. Like you said, if we could have it be a separate thing. And I think you're right on, to not commit, because we've, even in the short time that I've been on the board, just recently we've been discussing certain real estate, and we've discussed an executive session, which is totally appropriate to discuss potential real estate purchases, and we're talking a large amount of money. So if we went through with those, well, then that makes it harder to come with money. If we decide not to, we would have some, so that there's a lot of moving parts, and it's hard to just commit and say, well, yes, it's going to be available when we have all these pending possible capital fund purchases on the horizon.
We do have, if you go back to 11, is it $14 million of other projects?
That's correct.
So we do have that money there. I mean, that's going to be earmarked for land and other stuff like there, but we will be, if we did pass this as is, we'd be bringing in $14 additional million that we would have to reprioritize. But can you tell us what that is again? Land and what else?
Yeah, it's land. It has to do with safety and security, so it would be additional cameras, there's access control, things like that would be added to the buildings. There's design, and for the elementary schools, in our new schools, we have new foyers that have been built so that there's extra security. It would be going back to our older schools, and so we have some parity amongst the schools that way. Additionally, there's improvements at a number of schools that need to be made between the HVAC and the roofing. As some of the schools need to be replaced, this would be one of them here also, or improvements made. So, and then also we talked about earlier the Pasco Facilities Task Force. One of their main concerns was actually the maintenance facilities for transportation and the offices out there. There's money in for that also.
The Stevens money from the last bond that will not be spent, is that included in this estimate here, or would that be available to be repurposed? Because we're not going to, if we build new in lieu, we're not going to use that. Is that money already spoken for?
That money is not included in these estimates. That money is already accounted for in the 2013 bond. And the board, depending on, of course, what the board decides, the board could repurpose that money. That was
How
the
much
board
was that?
decision. Kim, $2 million now?
Approximately $3,050,000 for the Stevens remaining work, site work. We're gonna be pushing on this next phase about $1 million of that. So there's approximately $2 million left to accomplish the final phase, roughly speaking, at this point.
But if we pass this bond, would there be 3.5 or 1.5 of that's already spoken for, no matter what you're saying?
Approximately $1 million's already been spoken for, bid and been either built or bid.
Okay, so that's a good chunk right there that we could repurpose, 2 to 2.5 million.
I do think it's critical to make this bond really transparent. So if we do add the elementary grant for the possibility, I think we need to be very clear on, you know, if this passes, we will collect this. If it doesn't, we won't. Or if this passes, we will collect this. If it doesn't, we will repurpose it for X. I just think that needs to be clear in the bond. I as a voter want to know where my money is going. So if we're gonna have an if, we need a then.
I think there was some questions. I wanted to bring this up, and I would ask Howard to correct me if I'm off on this. We did a little research because there was a conversation about the annual debt service on a levy, and I think 5 years on $5 million, the debt service on that's $980,000, and then $603,000 in interest. So while when we talk about that, a capital levy, that's what it would look like, and we've got it out to 15 years here. So it's not cheap to do a capital levy. It costs money to do that. Is that pretty accurate, Howard?
Those were the figures for non-voting tax.
Okay.
Similar.
Okay. Just to give a feel for it.
I'm okay with keeping, since I've looked at the numbers and how difficult it would be to come up with that money, and in the current situation that we're in right now, we are more strapped than we've been in a long time. I just feel like it would be tough not to get that, if we don't have another way to pay for this without really making things, you know, I want to get to where we're replacing buses again. This isn't gonna happen if this passes. So I'm okay with adding this grant back on, as long as we are very clear with, you know, our if then, you know, if it passes, this will happen. If it doesn't, this will happen.
I would much prefer to add it on also, instead of making it something different.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just, there's a pause. I want to make sure that the board has all the time to make all the discussion they need to have.
And we'll have additional discussion at the board meeting tonight. People can repeat what they've already said or say additional stuff, and we'll see if we're ready as a board to take action.
You know, one more point is, you know, it's really hard to say we're a totally different Pasco. We are very, very different. I didn't live here 6 years ago, but I did live here and vote through 2 bonds. So, so we are probably a 20% different Pasco maybe than 10 years ago. I feel the best indication of future behavior is past behavior. The one bond that, when we did pass the 52-cent bond, it was originally put on, I believe, as 72 cents. So it was passed at 52 because the assessed value went up so much. And I'm hoping that made it more palatable because it passed quite well. But we did get a whole new high school that was extremely desperately needed right out of it. Right now, we are not in a situation where we are desperately needing a new junior high. We are desperately needing an elementary school right now. And we're getting desperate, I feel like, with those CHS classrooms. And so CHS classrooms, that's a priority. That wasn't so much until I really got out and saw how huge that was right now. We need more classrooms there. But my point is, we are passing right now 34% bonds, so I feel like a 52-cent bond is going to be pushing the envelope. I just worry, even though I would love a middle school added on with this bond, I'm just worried that the 70-cent bond is going to be, you know, we do have an aging population in Pasco that taxes are very significant too. And And I want to be respectful of those people as well.
Do you have a feeling for, this bond option 11 here shows that we would have for K-8, 68,000 square feet of new state match eligibility left. It looks like if we were to build another middle school in the future, if we selected this one, we'd need another 24,000 to build something like we're going to build Stevens to make that 92,000 square foot. How many more students would we need to get that additional space in order to get a full state match on another middle school in the future?
So you're saying 24,000 additional square feet based on the,
Based on what you have on this slide here, and it says if we were to pass bond option 11 or select bond option 11, at the end of it, we'd have 68,000 square foot of new space available to build another middle school, 92,000 square feet. So we'd need 24,000 more in state match. How many more students would that be? And Kim might be able to answer
I
that.
don't have my calculator with me, but if somebody has one, take 24,000 divided by 117.
117.
That's the allotment per student. Don't necessarily have to build it at 117 square feet per student, but it's a good place to start.
You got 24,000?
that's OSPI's match, is 117 per student, yeah.
What was the size of bond option 11, middle school size?
200? 206? 205?
205,
So within a year or two, or within a couple
Bond
years,
option.
we'd be up there again.
So we
Go
could
to
get
bond
100%
option.
For a full
match
match.
on the middle school.
If we looked at it in a year or two,
And I
if
do
we selected this
love that
one.
about number 11. We have 100% match clear down the line. We don't have that on the other one that I really like, which is number 5 with the new middle school. We have a 43% match.
That's 20,000.
So,
If we did hold off,
So
we could get that, we could take advantage of the full match.
Yeah, that's at the couple years. 3 grades. At 3 grades, so I think is, well.
so Mr. Christensen was just pointing out that the proposal here for a fourth middle school would be 115,000 square feet, so it might take us, we'd need another 400 or 420 students to get the full state match of growth.
For 1,100 kids.
Any other questions for Mr. Nunemaker? All right, appreciate it, Mr. Nunemaker, and we'll continue this discussion and possibly take action at the board meeting this evening.